But we begin this second hour of the Big Weekend Show with tensions in South America as President Trump continues to wage war against narco-terrorism. Hello, everyone. I'm Lydia Hu, along with Joey Jones, Dr. Nicole Saphier, and David Webb. Now, earlier today, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced the military conducted a seventh strike on a drug vessel in the Caribbean, killing 3 alleged narco-terrorists. This comes after a 6th strike on what was believed to be a submersible vessel. 2 alleged narco-terrorists survived and are being repatriated to Colombia and Ecuador. As the new war on terror ramps up, could we see an amphibious assault on Venezuelan land? Well, we've got Joey Jones, who's standing by at the touchscreen to break down what this could actually look like. Joey.
Yeah, guys, so we went over this a few weeks ago. I just want to elaborate a little bit more. For those of you that watched some of the coverage of what happened at Camp Pendleton yesterday, that wasn't just some show of, hey, we've got these cool toys. That's actually what an amphibious assault really does look like and some of the equipment used in it. So I wanted to put it in practical application and show you what's happening just south of us, where if something crazy happened and there was an amphibious assault, this is what we're looking at. So the first thing I want to point out are these are the assets we have there. And I just want to go over some of these. So the USS Gravely, the Dunham, let me find it here. There we go. Then we've got the Erie and the Stockdale. So Erie and Stockdale, you can correlate them over here. Those are actually offensive ships. Those are destroyers. Those are what we use to attack whatever we need to attack and defend ourselves. The reason why that's important is all the other ships left over, the Iwo Jima, the Fort Lauderdale, the San Antonio, and the Minneapolis-St. Paul, those are really cool. Those are some version of a ship that carries planes, helicopters, and most importantly, troops ashore. This is what makes the Marine Corps something completely different than any other military in the world and something special. So when you have these assets together, what you have is an organizational chart that I'll explain real quick. The naval ships are called an amphibious task force. Those are the ships I just identified, the Iwo Jima, the San Antonio, Minneapolis-St. Paul. And then you have over here, you have a Marine Air Ground Task Force. This is what the Marine Corps does unlike anybody else. What that means is they can come from the air, or they can attack you in the air and on the ground from sea. That's the big thing, is from sea. So when you have a Marine Air Ground Task Force, all the different assets the Marine Corps can do, and you put the logistics, the air wing and the ground combat troops under one command, the smallest version of that is called Marine Expeditionary Unit. And this is the equipment and the people stationed on the Amphibious Task Force boats. And what that creates is an amphibious ready group. And that's basically what we have down there. So I want to show you real quick what that looks like. But first, I want to show you a video of what's called an LCAC, just so you get an idea of how amazing this is. Those are inflatable bladder airboats coming ashore at Camp Pendleton yesterday, or Friday. And what is happening right there is on each of those can be tanks, can be troop carriers, can be Humvees, can be dozens of troops. Think of what happened on Normandy, but this is coming into an island. This is coming into a rocky situation. These boats right here are amazing. Just to tell you a little bit about them, they can carry 68 metric tons of payload. They can travel miles to shore. They can get onshore. They're an airboat, and they do it really, really fast. Now, what's coming off of those right now are some of the troop carriers, and that's what I want to get to. So if we come back over here to the board, I'll show you a little bit about it. So we have 2 types of troop carriers right now. We have AAVs and ACVs, and that's what you're looking at right here. So this one is an ACV. It's got 8 wheels, and the AAV would have tracks. This one carries a little less troops, but it's more agile. So what happens literally is these LSD, these different types of ships will be offshore in the ocean. The back of them will open up, and those giant airboats with these or different types of troop carriers on them will dump out the back, and they'll go miles into shore. Think of a hostile area getting hit by machine guns or mortars. Think about a rocky coral reef, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. These big airboats are going to bring your troops to shore. They're going to open up, and from them will come tanks or Humvees, whatever you need. And if you don't need the airboats, these amphibious assault vehicles, they can come right off the ship themselves. Now, that's a rocky ride. They tell you to put your helmet in your lap because you're going to puke in it. But they can go all from the boat miles into shore as well. Right. This is what the Marine Corps does. At the same time, different types of helicopters and what we call vertical takeoff aircraft, so Harriers and the F-35 variant made specifically for the Marine Corps, are coming overhead. You're having a multi-pronged assault. As soon as those troops get ashore and start attacking the enemy, in comes the logistics, the beans and bullets, the command post, all the other things. I was asked earlier about like Seabees, things like that, support personnel. They come in after that. And the reason why all this matters, and what I wanted to point out, is that the Marine Corps has a promise to the president. They can be anywhere to fight a fight within 72 hours. What we call this is we call this a response readiness group or a rapid response group. That means that when things happen like Kosovo, when things happen like what happened with Hurricane Sandy here even, we've got a MU, a Marine Expeditionary Unit, ready to hit the shore, either help people out or kill bad guys. You decide.
Gosh, Joey, that was an incredible presentation. And watching that video in particular, I can't help but think, if I'm Venezuela, I don't want any of those amphibious vessels coming my way anytime soon. So you got to think that he's got their attention. But there's also a track record. We've got a history of using these types of amphibious assaults in battles and winning, Joey. What do we know about how it's been used in the past?
Yeah, there are a lot of battles, a lot of major battles. We've got some here. Of course, you know about Normandy and the different types of vehicles. That was a long time ago. That LCAX has been around since the 80s, the AAV since the 60s or 70s. But even if you just keep looking, Operation Torch, Iwo Jima, of course, but even as recently as Desert Storm and in Iraq. So the reason why this matters is when we fought that 20-year war in Iraq and Afghanistan, once the initial invasion was over, Marines got on airplanes to go to war. And it was different. We lost a little bit of that touch of what we do so well, that amphibious assault. What we have right now happening because of leadership in the Marine Corps and DOD is a resurgence of that ethos and the modern day technology to make sure amphibious assault is what we can do and do well. And let me tell you why. The belief is if we went to war with China, it wouldn't happen in China or on the lower 48. It would happen among the islands in the Pacific. Now, we hold most of them, but not all of them. So we have to be able, even on islands that we hold now, if for some reason the Chinese were to attack, we have to be able to come in from the ship because our Navy is unparalleled. We can come in from the sea from anywhere. We can stage a blockade. We can do what we're doing in Venezuela, and we can take any island in the Pacific with a few good men and women.
Pretty straightforward, Joey. One thing about this too, and on the San Antonio, on the LPDs and on the LHDs, these are amazing platforms with newer technology. The Marine Corps is updated in the last few years.
That's right.
Those LCACs don't carry tanks anymore as much as they carry the armored carriers.
That's right.
And those fast deployable vehicles. Talk about those a little bit.
Yeah, so one thing that I didn't go over as much, and I'll bring it back, but we don't have a great graphic to represent it, is there's one vehicle here called an LCS. That's the Minneapolis-St. Paul. So the LCS is Littoral Combat Ship. That key word is littoral. That's, for lack of a better explanation, that's that shallow water around a piece of land. That type of warfare is where a lot of our technology is going. So when you think about drone warfare, you're thinking about the sky. Well, there are drones underwater too, and that's a big part of it. What the LCS is supposed to be able to do is counter mine technology, to be able to go in and clear mines, to make sure mines aren't there. Also, torpedoes for counter submarine. It's fast, it's agile, it's actually an aluminum hull. Unfortunately, that platform isn't proven yet. So they're going back to the drawing board on it a little bit. But that capability, we've got the technology to put on it as soon as we have the right platform. That's probably why there's only one of them here, because it doesn't do everything we want it to. But what we want it to do, and what we'll have a ship that'll be able to do, will be unparalleled by any other military in the world.
Joey, thank you so much for that incredible expert insight here. And I want to take the conversation from Venezuela now and talk about, another area in Latin America. President Trump is escalating his back and forth with the leader of Colombia. It is one of the countries where 2 alleged drug traffickers who survived one of the strikes will be sent. But Colombia's President Gustavo Petro is pushing back against these strikes. He claims the 7th strike was against a fishing boat. But meanwhile, President Trump slammed Petro, calling him an illegal drug leader and saying he's doing nothing to stop the drug trafficking. Trump announced he's slashing funding to Colombia. Well, Petro responded saying he's trying to promote the peace. So, Dr. Nicole, I want to come to you right away as we kind of open up this conversation. I was reading some reports about the drug flows from Colombia. Cocaine coming out of Colombia, it's the #1 exporter of cocaine in the world, and it doesn't look like it's slowing at all. Colombia is an ally of the United States, but it seems like there's good reason to really put some pressure on them.
Well, Lydia, I mean, none of this is new, right? I mean, Joey just gave a fantastic demonstration about why we have to be so strong in this area. Colombia has been the leading producer and exporter of cocaine now for decades. This hasn't just been the last couple of months or days. And ever since Gustavo Petro came in as the president of Colombia in 2022, he's had this mantra of total peace. But the problem with his total peace mantra is he's essentially taking a back seat to the narco terrorists because he is letting them kind of do what they do because he doesn't want the infighting, which I understand he doesn't want that violence. But what is that doing? That's fueling the drug issues. And Venezuela is just this transit area. We saw on that map that Joey was showed. It's right there. The drugs are going through Venezuela. And listen, drug trade, people are saying, why are we involved? This isn't the United States. The reality is this is not a foreign policy because the cocaine coming out of Colombia through Venezuela into the United States that's fueling the addiction and the violence here in our neighborhoods, in our cities. This is a national security issue. And President Trump is absolutely right in going on the offense here. He's doing what he has promised to do and protect Americans.
You know, so Joey, President Trump says, listen, Colombia, if you don't start cracking down on this, we're going to cut funding to you. They receive hundreds of millions of dollars from the United States every year, as much as $700 million in recent years, closer to 300 million most recently. But some might say, listen, Colombia needs that money to maintain order, to fight the drug producing in the country. If you cut that funding, then they might not be able to combat the drugs. Maybe the drug problem would get worse. Do you follow that argument, or would you disagree?
I mean, you know, if members of Congress fight for money to get spent in all kind of places for all kind of reasons. So any of that I hear with skepticism, and so do the deep state. And a lot of them are true believers. I would love to see that money go towards our own assets, whether it be CIA or military combating this. But I understand the necessity to have partners. But partners means that you're bringing something to the table. So bring something to the table from that money.
And David, you know, as we're talking about what's happening in Venezuela or what's happening in Colombia, there are questions about, you know, is this fighting narco-terrorism, or is this trying to actually achieve something more? Some folks, when it comes to Venezuela, are asking, is this, you know, are we pursuing regime change? And do we need to get Congress involved on that? You know, what are your thoughts on that?
They're not mutually exclusive. Because of some of the work I do with the Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom, I work with Iván Duque, the former president of Colombia, Álvaro Uribe, the former president of Colombia, Leonel Hernandez, former president of Dominican Republic. That brings you to the Caribbean Bridge. When you put this all together, Petro reversed course on everything. He is a narco president. There's no other way to put it. He reversed the advances, if you will, by Duque to clean up Colombia. The damage it does to the environment is significant. Making cocaine destroys rivers. It destroys entire ecosystems where it's being produced. Then you get to the human toll. It doesn't just come to America and isn't a significant problem for us with addiction and obviously drug use, but it spreads into the Caribbean and helps destabilize those countries. Look at Haiti, the recipient of a lot of it's a broken system with drug trafficking that spreads sometimes across into Dominican Republic. They share the island of Hispaniola. And when you look at this, it's a Venezuelan center to all of this. Look, we went into Bolivia to fight communists. We went there to fight FARC. We fought others. And I want us to be careful and not get involved in nation building. But I can tell you from conversations I have with these presidents, some current, some past, in these countries in Latin America, that they want this gone. They don't want to lose their young men to displacement to other countries. They want partners. They don't want nation building. And people can call it whatever they want. I sit with them. I work with them. We sit down and try to help them solve their problems. They really want to do it. Guys like Petro do not want to do this. Maduro does not want to do this.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like, you know, when it comes to the American people, one thing that I think a lot of people would give President Trump a lot of credit for is cutting down on the drug flow into our country across borders. And it seems like if this is part of achieving that, it would get a lot of support from the American people.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.